Hey there, welcome back to Legends in the Making. I'm Erin Sarles Bowers, and today I'm speaking directly to the parents. Not just the tired ones, but the ones who are paying attention, the ones who can feel it in their gut that something's off in the culture. That the way things are going, it's just not working. We know that. We weren't chosen to just raise a kid. We were assigned to raise a leader. And we are in a world that normalizes chaos, distraction, and identity confusion. That's calling has never been more important. Being a parent has never been more important. Understanding your role and responsibility is more important now than ever before. So let's talk about what it really takes. The culture is loud, but you are louder. I can think of many examples of my child. I have two that have pulled away or run into challenges within social constructs, pushing their limits, all the things. But one that really hits home for me is with my daughter, and really navigating, I think, how to establish your own identity as a young woman, who you are, what you want to do, and how to then fit in with friend groups. But then on top of that, if you start to date, in those interpersonal relationships that can be so intense. And she got into a relationship with a young man that was kind of on and off, and got some hurt feelings. They got back together, and she asked me my advice, and I just asked her, what she wanted to do, and that I loved her and supported her, and that it was her decision. And they spent about 6 months dating together, but it was a very tumultuous time for her personally. And it's not about sharing the details of her life, but what I learned as a parent. And ultimately, counseling became a part of what was going on, because I think she was really battling within herself of her own self-worthiness, who she truly was. And I think all this noise that we hear outside of ourselves, what society thinks is perfect, the way you should look, a multitude of things, trying to please somebody else, not knowing that just being yourself is always enough in any relationship. And it was a very challenging time as a parent, especially as they get older, teenage years, of like, how am I loving and supportive, knowing that some of these are her lessons that she's here to learn. Like, I'm not here to take over, but how can I support and equip her with what she needs to be wildly successful? And ultimately, we had a really powerful moment where my ex-husband and I actually interceded and stepped in, because things were getting I think she was feeling pretty disconnected and very overwhelmed. And so we ultimately met with the therapist and decided we were all going to come together as a family, the three of us, to have a conversation. And in this conversation, I remembered, the therapist talking and kind of really telling me all my child's problems. And as a coach, one of the things that came through that's a cornerstone and a pillar that I hold in the coaching work that I do is every human being, doesn't matter if you're 2 or 50, 75, 18, you're naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And I remember telling the therapist, as my husband sat there watching me, ex-husband sat there watching me, like stunned. I was like, it's your job to remind her that she's whole and complete and there's nothing wrong with her. Why are we feeding her this information that something is wrong with her, that she's broken and she needs fixing? And part of this started when they wanted to put her on some medication. And I'll just offer, like, that's the last resort for me until everything else is tried. And sitting in on this conversation, it was abundantly clear that not everything else was tried. The therapist was not even observant of my child's behavior as we were going through this OCD test, probably so they could prescribe medicine to say she's OCD. And I remember my daughter's swirling around in her chair. She's not paying attention. She doesn't know what the question is, just completely disengaged. And yes, I am a trained professional coach. And I was sitting there thinking, at no point did the therapist call out, like, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel uncomfortable? You seem very distracted or disengaged. Like, what's going on? And mind you, previous to this interaction, I had asked my daughter and she found the work very unhelpful. And I found myself being an advocate for my child in a way that I don't think she knew she needed. And it ultimately was, I think, the turning point in her and I's relationship, but also that was the point where we ended therapy, because I reinforced to her face that she is whole and complete, and we're here to help her remember the greatness of what she is, and that these challenges that she's facing are just an opportunity to see where you're not aligned into that greatness, and that there's nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. And I will never stop being an advocate for my child's remembrance of the truth of who they are, of you are whole and complete. You've got this. God made you amazing, whole, complete, and in the magnificence of Him, you are an exceptional person. And there is nothing or no one that should be telling you otherwise. And so what shapes them isn't always what you just say to them. It's the energy that you hold for them. It's the stands that you take to help them understand just how incredibly special they are. That doesn't mean they get to do whatever they want. It's understanding when you're doing things that don't feel aligned, what are we going to do to bring you back into alignment? And so, when I really learned from that was, this incredible opportunity of how to be a better parent through ultimately just holding space for my child to figure some of this out on their own, and continuously guiding them back to themselves and just asking really good questions versus like, I'm telling you not to do this, versus like, let me really understand why you want to do this and why. Tell me about your decision making. Because then you also hold the space of unconditional love, and you're also honoring their free will, which is so incredibly impactful, because that's the most loving thing that you can be doing. And so there has to be a shift in our parenting model to not be in panic, but to be in truth, to start to really understand that these are whole and complete individuals that are here for guidance and direction and love and support so that they can step into who they're supposed to be. We cannot overcompensate for them. We can't protect them from everything. That's not what our kids need. They need to know that they are exceptional. And I oftentimes ask my children, is what you're doing right now a reflection of how exceptional you are? Does this reflect the best of you? If the answer is yes, keep doing what you're doing. If the answer is no, why is it no? And what are you doing about it? Not, you can't have this bad grade. Well, they can, and they do. And do you want them to get good grades because that makes you happy? Or do you want them to get good grades because you see their potential and what they're currently doing doesn't show that potential? So how do you start to inquire in a more calm, loving, insightful ways that gets them caused to be in action? I have the tremendous opportunity at Blueprint to Bluechip to help families really start to create phenomenal transformations within their own home and with young athletes. But how do you just start to raise the standard? How do you start to understand what it means to be exceptional, and how do you start to raise exceptional kids? And to raise an exceptional kid means that you yourself also have to be walking that path of exceptionalism so that they can see that role modeled. And just holding space of the work that we do that I think is so special, because it's not just about coaching the student athlete and who they're becoming, of what is their character, integrity, and discipline, but it's also working with the parents and having them doing a lot of introspection, and then how they can lead their child to the best of their ability with new skills to really unlock their potential. And so ultimately, yes, as parents, we are not here to be liked. We are here to set the standard. We are here to lead them, to be way showers for them. And it's a team effort to do that. And it ultimately, when I think of all the things my children have gone through or went through and what they aspire to do, ultimately was one of the many things that ignited the fire for Blueprint to Bluechip. And then meeting my partner, who has a very different lens on the way this works, because they're a former collegiate athlete and have an incredible story. So I'm not here to tell theirs, but to understand that our unique perspectives and our unique skill sets bring something together to help these athletes, as well as the families and the coaches that they're working with, excel. And so we want to be building legacies. We want to change the trajectory of the future of this country, because we have strong, bright, independent thinking young men and women that use sports, that are such a great platform to lead and to show teamwork, to really start to change the trajectory of where we are headed. And it's each and every one of our responsibilities as parents. If we focus on our own home, if we focus on the legacy that we're trying to build with our children, they're going to be the ones building a better future for their children, and so on and so forth. And so we can't go to sleep at the wheel. This isn't about, did they get a D1 scholarship? This isn't about a D1 offer. It's not even about their GPA. The work that Blueprint to Bluechip does is about, who are they becoming? Who are they becoming? Are they becoming the child that you would entrust with the legacy of your family, to run the family business, to raise the next generation? And if you don't have a full yes, like, woo, yeah. And we all think our kids are great, but we also, too, as parents, know like we have some work to do. And our kids are also not getting this in school. They're not being taught to lead. They're not being taught who they are. They're not taught to stand up for what's right. We've put them in a culture where conformity and silence's acceptance is what they're being taught. And we cannot tolerate that anymore. We want to activate these young men and women into their full potential. And it's never too early to start. It's not creating kids that are perfect. It's about creating a presence where they can excel. And ultimately, every day, every moment, every interaction just continuously unlocks their potential in the future that they have right in front of them. So here are some reflections I would have you think about. You can journal on, and I'll include them in the caption, in the show notes. But what are 3 values I want my child to embody in 3 years? Do we ever sit down and it's like, I want them to be a good person, but like, what are the values that you want your child to be embodying in 10 years from now? And then you have to ask yourself, are those values being modeled and reinforced every day? And then where are times that I panic from, I'm parenting, but I'm parenting from panic versus like parenting from peace? What would the results or the shift in that be? And do you know how to do that? So what would change if I believed I was the standard my child is rising to meet? You weren't just called to raise a kid. You were chosen to raise a future leader, a future legacy. If this hits home, I want to invite you to join the 5-day Parent Athlete Reset. It's the exact process I created when my own family needed a shift. And now it's helping families around the country build homes full of clarity, connection, and character. So DM me the word reset to get started. Let's raise the bar and the next generation together.